No. Well, welcome to the live stream in the series of live streams. We're going to start going live on all of the channels. We have a special guest today, Tim Hammond, who those of you in the movement, I'm sure, have heard of or know personally. He is the executive director, founder of GALDEF, the General Autonomy, Legal Defense, and Education Fund. Right? We love Tim. He's been a lifelong activist, right, for both gay rights and children's rights. So we're very lucky that he'll be joining us today. I'm going to see if Tim is now on the live stream. Thank you for your patience. We started a few minutes late, but there's no problem there. Tim is going to be giving a talk at the conference, right? The second annual conference. I think he is now with us, which is fantastic. So let's give a round of applause. Hopefully this works. We'll see. It says live, but no video or sound. Tim, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Tim? It says live, but no video or sound. So we can see and hear you. Want to give a little...
You can see and hear me. That's good to know, but I don't see anybody on my laptop. So glad to know that, but I still can't hear you. My mic is on. My sound is on.
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Okay, well, what I had planned to talk about at the conference was basically an update about what's been going on with GALDEF since the last conference in Portland, Oregon in 2025. It'll be focusing on some of the things that our individual board members have done, like Leif Thompson, Matt Goodwin, and myself, also Dan McClymont, and also giving a bit of a historical perspective on what's happened in the arc of my involvement in this movement since 1989, and sort of give people there a sense for the progress that we've made.
Well, great. Can you not hear me? Can other people, live audience, can you hear me? All right, well, I'll text Tim your questions and he can get your texts. This is not an ideal format, but we will we'll get Tim.
Okay, elaborate on my talk last year versus this year. As I recall, what I talked about last year was an introduction to who I am, because as a lot of newer people have come into the movement, I've realized that there are people in the movement who have no idea who Marilyn Milos is, or maybe who John Geishiker is. These are some of the earlier pioneers in the movement, and I came into the movement in 1989, and there are people who, of course, have never heard of me, and that's fine. But I thought I wanted to give them a little bit of an impression of the different types of work that I've done in my close to 40 years in the movement, everything from street activism that kind of predated Bloodstained Men, to doing harm documentation surveys to give a voice to men and others who have been circumcised and the adverse consequences that they've experienced because of that. The production of my video, Whose Body, Whose Rights, that was in the mid-90s, 1995, 96, was the first ever documentary on circumcision, the history of circumcision, the medical fallacies, foreskin restoration, the types of harm, the beginnings of Brit Shalom in the Jewish community. That was aired on a number of PBS stations in the mid-90s, and it's now in the American Archive of Public Broadcasting. So there's a special website there, and you can go to that and watch the video there. I also talked in greater detail about the differences between GALDEF and Intact Global, that we're not competitors, we're partners. We cooperate and work together and try to help each other wherever we can, so that it's not a duplication of efforts, but it's a magnification of our efforts, and we help each other along the way.
And so the next question is, how does GALDEF promote collaboration between intactivists, right? And how is this conference going to promote that? Right. So that's the text essentially that I.
So how do I see the intactivist groups coming together and working together, especially with regard to this conference, and how does GALDEF promote collaboration between intactivists? I'll answer the latter first. One example of how GALDEF tries to help Intact Global is so that we have a page that we've just revised for search engine optimization called the Equal Protection Circumcision Lawsuit, in which we tell the public what these types of lawsuits are all about. And even though GALDEF is not initiating these lawsuits, we're trying to help. And so we have extensive FAQs about what the lawsuit is about and what it's not about. It's not about taking away rights from women who are protected by the anti-FGM laws. It's not about reducing the ceiling of protection for women, but raising the floor of protection for all children, regardless of sex, so that they're all protected from needless genital cutting. And so we try to funnel potential plaintiffs into the Intact Global website. And another thing we have done, which I plan to talk about next weekend, is the new potential plaintiffs video. It's a 90-minute video with interviews with Eric and with David Llewellyn, advising people who want to file litigation to stop the practice or to get some kind of compensation for what was done to them, and the how-tos and what to expect if they're going to go into a lawsuit like this. And I'll be playing an excerpt from that potential plaintiffs video during my presentation.
Well, fantastic, Tim. Thank you for that. Can you hear me at all? I'm going to say great answer. What type of litigation does GALDEF support beyond equal protection that Intact Global? If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll text Tim as well. This might be a little shorter.
So what type of litigation does GALDEF support? That's a great question, Eric. When I co-founded GALDEF in 2022, and it was with the idea to support a broad array of litigation. When Intact Global came along, Eric, you and I talked about this, and it was your desire to launch equal protection lawsuits, challenge the state at the state level about the lack of equal protection based on sex alone. And that's a great way to challenge it. But there are a number of ways that I see that we can challenge this practice of newborn circumcision. It could center around, let's say, fraud And you talk about that in the potential plaintiffs video, Eric, as to intentional fraud and constructive fraud. We could have another lawsuit if a plaintiff comes along claiming that they were circumcised with Medicaid paying for it. And we all know that Medicaid is forbidden from paying for these types of medically unnecessary surgeries. It's not part of their mandate to use taxpayer dollars to pay for medically unnecessary surgeries. So if we get a plaintiff that would want to file in that case, wonderful. We may get a plaintiff who really wants to challenge the very notion that parents can even consent to medically unnecessary surgery on their child. This, in fact, was the question that was brought up in the mid-'80s with the Adam London case in Marin County, north of San Francisco. We talk about this in the video as well, asking the very question, do parents have the right to consent to medically unnecessary surgery on their children? Unfortunately, at that time, it was probably too soon. The judge dismissed the case, basically saying, what a silly question. Of course, parents do. But this is 2026. Times have changed. People have a greater recognition of children's rights and the fact that the foreskin has value and circumcision is, according to Penn and Teller, they have a special episode on this, that circumcision is bullshit. And this is what more and more of the public is coming to realize. So there's any number of cases that could come along. And while GALDEF cannot fund all cases, and while GALDEF cannot fund even a complete case, because as you know, sometimes these run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, we can at least provide partial grant money to the plaintiffs and the attorneys who are bringing this impact litigation to help ease the financial burden of bringing these types of lawsuits.
Well, great answer, Tim. And, you know, GALDEF has helped with the Oregon litigation with the $10,000 grant, which has been super helpful. So we appreciate that. We look forward to helping Tim fund other lawsuits as well in GALDEF, you know, however that might be, whether we find plaintiffs or find the lawyers, or maybe I, you know, help represent some of the lawyers if they're in California, since I'm licensed there. So that's great. If you have any questions for Tim, feel free to drop them in the chat. Matthew Kinnison of the Bloodstained Men is here. So Matthew, great to see you. I look forward to meeting you as well in person. It's going to be a great weekend, and it's only in 8 days it really starts. So we are on the cusp, right? The precipice, play on words, the precipice of the conference. So we have some other comments. Oh, Tim did do a great documentary, which he mentioned, Whose Body, Whose Rights. Anything else you'd like to share with other conference attendees or thinking of attending the conference? Perhaps selling the importance of in-person organizing.
So anything else I'd like to share? There's a lot that I plan on sharing. I'll give people a little bit of heads up notice here that GALDEF has produced a new brochure that can be used with anyone in the public, including prospective parents. And it approaches the whole topic of circumcision from a different angle of not here's the medical pros and cons, now mom and dad, you make your decision. No, it's basically raising the whole question of long-term harm, that more and more people who identify as men, who identify as intersex, who identify as transgender female, all of whom can and have been subjected to penile circumcision at birth, that there are long-term adverse effects to this. And this is a new consideration that parents need to think about. As one of the uh, interviewees in another really good film called The Circumcision Movie, made by a couple of midwives. He's a sexologist, and he said parents are basically making a sexual decision for their sons. And I don't think that ever crosses people's minds when they're making this decision. They have to realize that. And this is one thing that the brochure that we're going to have copies of at the conference, that they need to be aware of. Another aspect that the brochure brings out is that litigation will increase into the future. There will be more men stepping forward to claim their harm and to file impact litigation. And we'll also be talking about the new manuscript that Matt Goodwin from our board and I submitted. It's getting ready for publication in the BMJ Practical Bioethics Journal. It's a survey of about 100 hospitals in the Northeast region of the US of their consent forms. And as you can imagine, they're all over the place in what they do and do not speak about. But one in particular, a hospital in New Hampshire, a Catholic hospital in New Hampshire, actually says on the consent form, we release ourselves of any liability if your son should decide at some future point that he wants to file a lawsuit. So basically, they're telling the parents, hey, it's on your shoulders, buddy. But I think, Eric, as you and I talked about, they can't really absolve themselves. Hospitals can't absolve themselves of this. And here's another thing that you could bring a lawsuit over. But it's interesting to me that at least one hospital so far acknowledges that lawsuits are a possibility. And I think that's going to be a large area for us to combine forces and work to create that kind of litigation.
Well, the only PD is mentioning this new study that came out showing the femular delta is the G spot, which is removed with circumcision, the male G spot, which we've known. But so we're going to have one more question from Tim, just because it's a kind of a tough format today. But from Future Intact, I've heard that medical students are required to perform a circumcision in order to become a doctor. Is that legal, true? And do nurses...
Just a moment here. I'm reading the text here.
And do nurses have legal protections if they say no, if they're a conscientious objector, or can they be fired over that? So I'm going to let Tim field those.
Future Intact is asking if medical students are required to perform circumcisions to become a doctor. Can you answer? Yes. From everything I've learned over the years from talking to physicians who are in practice, to medical students who are currently in medical schools, they were almost universally required to perform infant circumcision as their first surgery because it was so simple. And oftentimes residents will do circumcision, not an actual physician. And part of what I have always felt about this is medical school is like a boot camp. You're there to learn. You don't question. And if you do question, you're labeled a troublemaker and maybe you won't even make it out of medical school. But part of the requirement, in my personal opinion, part of the requirement to do infant circumcision is to begin the process of making the doctors, future doctors, immune to the screams of the baby and learn to block that out and just focus on the procedure and technique and so on and so forth. Interestingly, Dr. Paul Fleiss, who's no longer with us, was a pediatrician. I think he is pediatrician to the stars in Hollywood. And he actually told me the story of how he did hundreds of infant circumcisions exactly the way he was taught in medical school, hundreds of circumcisions before he began to hear the screams of the babies. And when he heard the screams of the babies, when that finally registered with him, that's when he took a moral and an ethical stand to stop circumcising.
Well, thank you, Tim. We're going to have one final question.
You have another question here. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you because I can't hear or see you, but the other question is, do nurses have legal protection, doctors and nurses who refuse to participate? I think that's a question best left to John Geishiker from Doctors Opposing Circumcision. He does counsel future medical professionals about how to become conscientious objectors. It has to be done in a sensitive way, of course. But just as there are people who are conscientiously opposed to doing abortions, I think it's a growing recognition in the medical field that if you're conscientiously opposed to doing infant circumcision, if you approach it in the right way under the guidance of Doctors Opposing Circumcision, you stand a pretty good chance of being able to establish yourself as a conscientious objector. So anyway, that's all I'll say about this.
So Tim has one final question that I queued up for him via text. So is John Geishiker going to be at? Yes, he is. He'll be presenting as well, Matthew Kinnison. He'll be at Intact Global's second conference next weekend, right? And so there will be about 22 speakers, and when Tim logs off, he's going to do a kind of final question, right, or final sign off, just because that's how should I say, we had a little tech hardship today, but at least we could see and hear Tim's beautiful voice, right? And so we're gonna have one final thought from Tim, and then I'll show you where to buy tickets. And we've already got tons of ticket sales, so I'm looking forward to next week. So Tim, I'm going to say final sign-off words.
Any final sign-off words? Well, be there or be square, I guess. It's an old-fashioned phrase, but I think this is a momentous occasion. And I think anybody who really wants to get really involved in the movement needs to be at the Intact Global Conference next weekend in Los Angeles.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for joining us and for being a great sport. Even with the tech hardship, we were able to have a good conversation, right? More of an interview than anything else. And we will see you in 8 days in Los Angeles, right? On the Friday Founders Dinner, and then the Golden Gopher, and then the 2 days of talks. So including the gala Saturday evening. So thank you so much, Tim. We really appreciate your time, and we'll see you very, very soon. So I'm going to say wave goodbye. Wave goodbye, Tim. There he is. Okay, bye, Tim. Good to thank you for coming on. Okay, well, that was Tim Hammond, the man, the myth, the legend. Also made a fantastic documentary, Whose Body, Whose Rights. It really was a trailblazer of its time, and now we're getting a ton of traction. So for those of you who want to get tickets, here's the link, intactglobal.org. And if you were to go there, this is what the website looks like, intactglobal.org. And then you have that top bar, or get your tickets right here, right? And this will show you all of the speakers that are there. There's a fair number of speakers, a lot of leaders in the movement, a lot of very promising future leaders, long-standing leaders, you name it, right? You can't throw a stone without getting, we have got the cream of the crop giving their best for 2 days, including a gala, including the Founders Dinner, including the dance. I mean, and we've got some great live performers too that I queued up today who are supportive of the movement and just want to make sure. And we're in LA. So yes, we love Tim, the only PD, absolutely. And so anyway, to get your tickets, you just click any of these buy ticket links. There's also a discounted hotel rate if you book right there. But any of these buy tickets will get you to the ticket tailor link. And then here you go. It's actually regular bird now, but we're not going to increase the price because we want you there. There's a $25 default donation. You can make it $0, or you can make it, whatever you want, 101, right? That would be ideal. So $300, right? For 2.5 days of events, not bad at all. Put in your name, your email, whether it's for yourself, someone else, if you have any dietary restrictions. And, I just got a ticket to the conference. Took me about 1 minute, right? You do pay once you put your info in. I already got my ticket, so that's easy. So anyway, that's how it works. I will see you all there in 8 days, right? 8 to 9, depending when you count when the conference starts. Again, my name is Eric Clopper, and I look forward to meeting you at the conference and to ending the genital mutilation of children in the near future. So thank you so much for joining, and I will see you at the next live stream, which is scheduled for tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific time, because we take no days off, right? Okay, I'll see you tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and everything in between. All right, bye guys.